For 150 years, one plaster cast at Pompeii broke people's hearts. An adult, lying back, one arm curled around a small child, a golden bracelet on the wrist. Everyone who saw it knew what they were looking at. A mother shielding her baby in the last second before the ash took them both. That was the story. It was on the postcards. It was in the school books. Guides told it to visitors with a catch in their voice. Then, in 2024, someone finally read the DNA inside the bones. The mother was a man, and the child was not his. To understand why that lands so hard, you have to understand how Pompeii was read. When Vesuvius buried the town in AD 79, the ash hardened around the bodies. The flesh rotted away and left hollow spaces, perfect molds of people in their final positions. In the 1800s, archaeologists poured plaster into those cavities and pulled out human shapes, frozen mid-gesture. It was extraordinary. For the first time, you could see the dead not as skeletons, but as people, reaching, huddling, holding each other. And naturally, the excavators told stories about them. This one was a pregnant woman. These two were sisters. That group by the garden wall was a family, caught together at the end. The jewelry, the poses, the sizes of the bodies all seemed to say who these people were to each other. For generations, nobody had any reason to doubt it. The bodies looked like a story. So the story became fact, and the fact got printed, repeated, and taught until it felt like something we had always known. Here's the problem. A plaster cast preserves a shape. It does not preserve a relationship. Everything past the shape was a guess, dressed up over time as knowledge. So a team from the University of Florence, Harvard, and the Max Planck Institute did something the Victorian excavators never could. They drilled into the skeletal fragments still trapped inside 14 of the casts, and they pulled out ancient DNA. They expected the genetics to confirm the famous scenes. Instead, almost every story fell apart. Think about what those old interpretations were really built on, because this is where it gets interesting. There were three quiet assumptions doing all the work. The first was that jewelry meant a woman. The adult with the golden bracelet, cradling the child, had been called a mother for over a century, largely because of that bracelet and that tender pose. But the DNA came back with a Y chromosome. The adult was biologically male, and when the team compared his genome to the child's, there was no parent-child link at all. No maternal line, no paternal line. A grown man holding a small child he was not related to, in the dark, as the town died around them. We do not know who he was to that child. A guardian, a rescuer, a stranger who scooped up the nearest small body and ran. The tender story is still tender. It is just not the one on the postcard. The second assumption was that closeness meant kinship. In another famous group, two adults died in what looked like an embrace, long read as sisters, or a mother and daughter. The genetics showed at least one of the pair was a man. They were not the sisters of the story, and the family bond everyone had assumed was holding them together. In that final moment simply was not there in the blood. People reached for each other at the end. That part is real, but who they reached for was not always family. Sometimes it was whoever happened to be beside them when the sky came down. That leads to the third assumption, and this is the one that reframes the whole town. The excavators had quietly pictured Pompeians as a settled, local Italian people, families rooted in one patch of ground for generations. The genome-wide data says something else entirely. The people in these casts descended largely from recent immigrants, with ancestry pointing back to the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East. These were not the great-great-grandchildren of one Italian village. Their roots ran east, across the sea, to places like the Levant and the Aegean. Pompeii was a busy port in a sprawling empire, and the empire moved people constantly, through trade, through slavery, through migration and marriage. The bodies in the ash were never a portrait of one rooted bloodline. They were a snapshot of a mixing, moving, cosmopolitan world, the kind of place where the person next to you might carry the genes of a coastline 1,000 miles away. This is not a documentary theory or a fringe claim. It is a peer-reviewed study. Published in the journal Current Biology on the 7th of November 2024, led by geneticists and archaeologists including David Caramelli, Alyssa Mitnick, and David Reich. The team recovered and read ancient DNA from the skeletal remains inside the plaster casts, checked the biological sex of the individuals, and tested for genetic relationships between them. Where the old stories claimed mother, sister, family, the DNA was the tiebreaker. And again, the DNA disagreed. Not because the archaeologists were careless, but because they were reading bodies through their own assumptions about who holds a child and who wears a bracelet. Sit with the man and the child for a moment. For 150 years, school children stood in front of that cast and were told, "This is a mother protecting her baby." They felt something true looking at it. Now, imagine what actually happened. The ground is shaking. The sky is black at midday. Ash is falling like hot snow, and the air is turning to poison. And a man who, as far as the DNA can tell, had no blood tie to this child at all, pulls the child in and wraps an arm around it anyway. He could have run alone. He would have moved faster alone. He didn't. Whoever this child was to him, neighbor's kid, servant's son, a face he half knew from the street, he decided in his last minutes that the child would not die alone. That is not a smaller story than the one we lost. In some ways, it is a bigger one. It says that when Pompeii ended, people protected children who were not their own. The bracelet fooled us. The instinct behind that arm did not. What the DNA really exposed at Pompeii was not the volcano. It was us. For 150 years, we looked at strangers frozen in ash and quietly wrote our own assumptions onto their bones. We decided that jewelry meant woman, that closeness meant family, that a rooted Italian town meant rooted Italian blood. The genetics took all three away without raising its voice, and it leaves a harder question hanging over every ancient body we think we understand. How many other mothers, sisters, and families in our museums are just poses we named, stories we needed to be true? Pompeii was supposed to be the one place where we could see the past exactly as it was, caught in the act, preserved to the last gesture. It turns out we were mostly seeing ourselves. The ash kept its people perfectly. We were the ones who kept getting them wrong.